Hey guys, here's my review for Wonder Woman 1984. So I saw Wonder Woman 1984 a few weeks ago, the day after it was released on HBO Max and in theaters. And if you haven't seen it yet, don't worry. I'm gonna do general thoughts first, and then go more into my in-depth thoughts. So the beginning of this video will be spoiler free, and then I'll, give a warning as to when I'm gonna go more into the plot details and spoilers. So when it came to this movie, I was sort of going in expecting something pretty general and simple, nothing that was gonna blow me away or anything. I kind of just wanted to see Wonder Woman being Wonder Woman and doing her thing. Even though I liked the first movie quite a bit, there was just something about this where I wasn't really expecting to be blown away or anything, and on that level, I got what I wanted. But in terms of a movie itself, it's not anything great, which is why my expectations weren't let down or anything like that. Um, like the movie, I don't think is anything too special or too different from other superhero movies and movies in the genre. I think it's pretty just like general run of the mill. You won't really miss anything if you don't watch it, which is kind of sad to say because a lot of talented people are involved in this. But yeah, it didn't really blow me away, but I wasn't disappointed because I wasn't really expecting it to. Whereas I know a lot of people were expecting something better. And it's not like I like the movie better than most people. I just, it's pretty much just exactly what I expected. I think the movie looks really nice. It's got sort of got the look of one of the original Richard Donner Superman films, and it kind of has more of a colorful, light look, like in the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, as opposed to other films, not only in the superhero genre but in the series that look very bleak and dark, and it just looks gray and brown and kind of ugly. So I did like the way that the film looked. And apparently, Patty Jenkins shoots on film, which is why it has such a nice look to it. In terms of direction, it's directed really well. Like, I can't really think of anything that would show sort of a weakness in directing. It writing is kind of eh. The actual plot of the movie revolves around this wishing stone, which kind of allows for anything in the film to happen, which makes setting rules pretty difficult because there are no rules essentially. Acting, Gal Gadot's pretty good in it. Chris Pine is great in it as usual. I liked Kristen Wiig in the role of Minerva and slash Cheetah. I thought that she did a pretty good job, and a lot of people are complaining about how we've seen this sort of character before, but I personally don't really have a problem with that since she wasn't annoying like other versions of this type of character, like Electro and Amazing Spider-Man 2, or people were making comparisons with Riddler. But when we came out of the theater, my brother told me that he thought that she fit more of the Selena Kyle vibe from Batman Returns, which is not annoying at all. It's easy for this type of character to become annoying, but I thought that she was pretty sympathetic and likable. Pedro Pascal is also really good in the movie and very over the top in a likable way. And it's cool to see that there's a way that he's a match for Wonder Woman in a way that isn't in terms of physicality, but he is able to pose her in, via his powers that aren't related to his ability in fighting. That's more what Cheetah is about when it comes down to the climax of the film. And a lot of people have criticized that that's the only reason she's in the movie. I don't entirely agree with that, but I do think it is one of the reasons she is in the film. I think the weakest link of the movie is easily the writing. Again, the actual plot of the movie sort of makes it so anything can happen, and it's sort of a free for all, but not in a good way. It's a free for all in a way where you can't exactly keep up with what's possible and what isn't, and at the end it sort of becomes a bit muddled. So yeah, I do think that if you are looking for sort of a generic comic book movie to sort of just sit back and enjoy, then you'll like it. There isn't too much about this movie to dislike, but overall, it's in comparison to a lot of other superhero films, it's kind of bland and generic, and a lot of people seem to agree on that in general. All right, so now I'm going to get into the more in-depth spoilery details about the film. So if you haven't seen it yet, then you should probably stop listening. And if you have seen the movie, then keep on listening. So something that a lot of people are talking about, which is bizarre in the movie, is the idea that when Steve Trevor comes back, he isn't coming back as his own self in his own body. He, for some reason, possesses the body of another person. And Diana and Steve are totally cool with the idea of just using this guy's body for the rest of Steve's life. And that's really weird and creepy because there's an implication that they had sex, and that's basically raping the dude's body without him knowing, and he probably had a totally different life. So it's just really bizarre knowing that they didn't even ask the question of whether it was right for them to take this body. And the thing that really annoys me and is annoying a lot of people is the idea that they literally could have just written it so Steve Trevor just comes back and doesn't have to possess a body. Like, there isn't anything in the movie that would cause that to be a contradiction. So you could just have that Steve Trevor shows up and you don't have to write the weird rule that he's in someone else's body and taking over their body instead. It's just really uncomfortable when you think about all these implications. And not only that, but the fact that Diana doesn't recognize him as Steve Trevor until he introduces himself as Steve Trevor and says, "I wish we had more time," which is, what he said at the end of the first film, before he dies on the plane. And the idea that Diana would just sleep with this random looking guy who claims to have the soul of her previous boyfriend it's just bizarre in of itself. It's just really weird that she just, and there's a part in the movie where she says, like, "I just see you." And I took that literally initially, but then I was talking to people and basically everyone agrees that that was meant more figuratively, and that he still, to her, looked like the other guy. And she didn't have a problem being with him because he was Steve Trevor. Also, I remember before this movie came out, there were reports saying that apparently in the movie she didn't use a sword and a shield, and whereas in the first movie she did. And I thought that was really bizarre, considering the fact that, like, Batman and Superman in the same universe are murderers, basically. Like, they kill people without issue. So I thought that it was some sort of thing where it's like, because she was a woman, she wasn't going to be able to have these more violent weapons or whatever. But it actually does make sense in the plot, because you see that most of the people she's fighting are under the brainwash power of Maxwell Lord, so she wouldn't be needing to murder them. Whereas killing German soldiers in 1917 is acceptable. The action was also really well done. Probably not as good as in the first film. But there's this scene where they're driving through Egypt, and it's very Indiana Jones. And in Raiders of the Lost Ark, when that scene takes place, it's also in Egypt. So to me, that was a really obvious reference to that movie. I also think that when it comes to Cheetah, the jump from her wanting to become more and more powerful to just becoming a cheetah person is really weird. And of course, that's from the comic books, so of course that was going to happen. But I feel like if you don't know anything about that character and you just watch the movie, it's not natural at all for her to make a wish that would lead her to turn into that, or for her to want to turn into that. Apparently, my brother tells me that in the comics it's different because she's cursed with that, and then that is the sort of charge that causes her to have hatred towards Diana, which makes much more sense. Another thing that's darkly comical is that at the end of this movie, Washington, D.C. is going to shit. And I'm so glad that this is fiction and not happening in real life. Seriously, when I was watching the news all day, I was wondering if the people in D.C. had to just renounce their wishes, because it was exactly the same scene. Also, here's another detail that I feel like I'm the only one who noticed, because I'm sort of a movie scores nerd. But when Diana is telling Pedro Pascal's character Max to let go of everything he wants and to renounce his wish. She says she's like talking to him about like the truth and like how lies are bad and all of this sort of generic generic moral of the story that doesn't really work in my opinion. But in that moment, the music starts to kick in, and I was like pretty sure that like it sounded like Hans Zimmer's music for Batman. And then I was like, oh well, it's the same composer, maybe it just sounds similar. And then the theme actually started coming in, and I was like, what the hell? Why are they using the Batman music? But then while I was in the theater, I was thinking about it, and I was like, wait a minute, the name of this music theme is Beautiful Lie, which, you know, does fit well, but it is a bit weird when you, even though it's called Beautiful Lie, I personally associate it with Batman, and they're using his theme for Wonder Woman, which is a bit bizarre. Another thing is, I feel that this is one of the weirdest 80s nostalgia movies I've ever watched, because it feels like it doesn't entirely exploit the 80s the way that things like Stranger Things or X-Men Apocalypse do, where it's really like warranting of it taking place in the 80s, where this, it doesn't really take too much advantage of that, separate from politically, but not so much in clothing or music and that sort of stuff. And there's like no 80s music in this, which I thought was really shocking, especially because they used New Order in the trailer. I was expecting sort of like a Guardians of the Galaxy style playlist, but there's like basically like little to nothing in terms of 80s nostalgia, which made me feel like it wasn't exactly worth putting this film in the 80s, and instead you could have done it in modern day. But yeah, overall, I guess I would say that the movie's fine. It's nothing too special. Um, like when we went to go see it, it was a day or two after Christmas, and the reason that we went to see it in theaters was because we lost power because of this pole that fell. But I would recommend that instead of seeing it in theaters, you just get HBO Max for one day and watch it there, and then just cancel your subscription. Just watch it from home. It's really not, you know, that big of a deal. It's nothing great. You shouldn't go out of your way to do that if you're paying a pretty similar price. I'm pretty sure it is. So yeah, those were my thoughts on Wonder Woman 1984, and I will have another review soon. Thank you for listening.